Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. The much awaited for Sadc Extraordinary Summit to discuss the post-election violence in Mozambique by the Sadc heads of states took place yesterday. And as many people had feared, the summit condemned the post-election violence without even any reference to the many allegations that the election process was flawed and illegal. Particularly the fact that many Zimbabweans voted in those elections. To be quite honest, many of us expected the Sadc summit to condemn the violence and pretend that the election process was free, fair, and credible. It is an outrage that they come up with such a blanket statements like those who are not happy with the results should follow the legal channels and lodge their complaints with the court. Ben, is this what you expected?
Good day to you and good day to everybody. This week, we watched the Tyson fight, and I felt it was a big fraud. A few days later, here comes Sadc and takes, you know, center stage. I when they say an extraordinary meeting, one would presume that there's something that needs immediate attention. You know, it can't wait. And from what we are reading and hearing, what took place, one is very puzzled to say what was the meeting for, because basically, like rightfully you said, it was it was just a blanket to cover up the whole mess. Nothing was actually talked about in depth. Nothing was actually given a solution at the end of the day. you know I'm just wondering, what was it all about? you know it it doesn't make any sense to me whatsoever.
Well, the opposition leader on the screen there has lodged an appeal with the Mozambican authorities to have the whole election, particularly the presidential results, nullified because nearly 300,000 Zimbabweans, according to data from um, Southern African Human Rights Organization, voted. That appeal is supposed to be heard. But what matters here is to go back to the Sadc summit itself. Is that the Sadc summit, like most people pointed out, when it was proposed that it would take place in Zimbabwe, many people say that was the wrong place for the Sadc summit to take place, given that ZANU PF was named in the vote ranking in Mozambique. Here is the accused presiding over the proceedings of the court. If Sadc summit was to sort out the problems of the rigged elections, how could that sorting out be chaired by the man who is accused of involvement in the rigging? It just didn't make any sense at all. And for the record, many of the Sadc leaders did not turn up for the Sadc summit yesterday. And I think their decision has been vindicated by the statement of the Sadc summit. No one expected the Sadc summit to come up with anything close to admitting that ZANU-PF was involved. I don't know whether you saw the statement by the Zimbabwe ambassador to Mozambique, Victor Matemandanda, dismissing the allegations that Zimbabweans had voted in those elections with the usual contempt that it was not true, that somebody was planting that information and that those videos were fake. It's an outrage. This doesn't make any sense at all. It's an insult to anyone who saw those videos. I don't know whether you saw the video yourself, Ben.
No, I did not see the current video of Victor Matema, but I know that he spoke previously to say that Zimbabweans should stay away. But Mozambique currently is not conducive for any civil activities. That's as far as I would know. I didn't get a chance to listen to this, but I mean that is to be expected. You cannot expect ZANU-PF to comment out saying we are sorry, we did this. I mean that will be just us daydreaming that they would do that. Of course they would come out guns blazing and refuse the whole allegation completely. That is what ZANU-PF does. But like you said, we saw the video evidence, not only the actual voting, but we saw the evidence of Zimbabweans getting Mozambican IDs. So we saw the play, from the very beginning right up to the end. I'm not sure about the 290,000, but what I can what's the concrete evidence that is there is that Zimbabweans were given Mozambican IDs. Zimbabweans voted in the Mozambican election. And there is no way they can, refuse that, because there is that video evidence and it can be presented.
Well, the video evidence here is one of the video that was being shown around. Let me just line it up. Sorry, it's taking forever to load. But to come back to the issue of these elections, what most people are failing to appreciate here is that the summit was a waste of time. The summit was supposed to help Mozambique really address this problem of rigged elections. Mozambique, like Zimbabwe, has been independent since 1975. And that country has not had free, fair, and credible elections. All elections have always been contested. There's always been allegations of rigged elections. So this was the golden opportunity for Mozambique to address it. But as one can see, when you have got somebody like Mnangagwa, who rigged his own Zimbabwean elections, and even when he was told that those elections were flawed, he dismissed it with the contempt that you honestly say this is not right. The election observer team, the chairperson of that team, was abused to the point where you are saying this is not right. The level of abuse that Dr. Neves Mumba received from the ZANU-PF regime is unacceptable. But that's what happened. Mnangagwa himself dismissed claims that the elections were not free, fair, and credible with contempt that left no one in no doubt that he really didn't care what anybody else said. That is the level of contempt that we have got to deal with here. We are dealing with here. Here is that video clip again.
Vana vakatuka ZANU-PF kana ini ndonyanyisa kufara kuita zvakanaka. Ukavona vavengi vako vachikurumbidza nekuchikanganisa, ukavona vachiti ZANU-PF yakaipa, farai, because you are doing correct things for your country. Hongu takaita maelections edu, kuna vamwe vaitaura zvisina musoro zvikanzi maelections anafamba zvakanaka, ndezvavo.
The Sadc summit itself, when you've got somebody with that kind of attitude, it was inevitable that the summit would just be a waste of time. So it ended up condemning those who were protesting that the elections were not free, fair, and credible, without even bothering to look at the evidence. In many ways, it reminds me of Zimbabwe's own election process. The nation has been warned again and again that it should not participate in the flawed elections without implementing the reforms. And that if you participate, you're only giving the process legitimacy. And I think the majority of the Sadc leaders who did not bother to turn up yesterday were following that advice. If they had turned up, all of them, to that summit, and as we can see now, the summit's conclusion was to condemn the violence and ask anyone who had any complaints to lodge their complaints in the normal way. In other words, lodge your complaints through the courts, which have consistently failed to hold free, fair, and credible elections. The whole thing becomes totally meaningless. This is just an endless cycle. So I think this is, to me, the single most important message to come out of the Sadc meeting. That Sadc meeting yesterday was another wasted opportunity. And I am glad that the majority of the Sadc leaders did not see the need for them to even grace it with their presence. Sadc is in a serious mess. It has lost a lot of credibility, and they really need to seriously look themselves in the mirror if they're ever going to get out of this mess. Thank you very much, Ben. Do you want to give your closing remarks?
In closing, I would want to say, it was the SADC, observer team that condemned the Zimbabwean election and said it was not free, fair, and credible. And it is unusual now. And Mnangagwa came out and said, it's none of their business. Basically, if you're not satisfied, it's none of your business. Now he is now the chair of the organization that he insulted. It's kind of weird and awkward and baffling at the same time that this is what has happened. But before we close, I think it's one thing that we need to talk about, to say, going forward, can we now depend on SADC to help the citizens in any way or form? Because with their current behavior, or with their current way of handling situations, I mean, let's not take for granted people are dying in Mozambique, people are dying in DRC, people were killed, and some were hurt in Zimbabwe during the elections, and SADC has never come out to say anything. All they do is seem to praise the peace during the election period or the election day, and they blanket everything beyond or before that. So my question to you would, if you could help, even the viewers would probably have the same question to say, moving forward, do you think it's a good idea to approach SADC to help any, Southern African country if they have a problem?
I think the answer to that one is clear, that as much as we are disappointed with SADC's performance this time, SADC is the only regional body that we have. The people have been disappointed with the AU, but that's the continental body we have. And so whenever there is a problem, as long as we are still in SADC, we have to look to SADC to see whether they can help. At the present moment, with looking at what happened yesterday, vis-a-vis the Mozambican situation, I think one cannot deny that SADC has been a great disappointment. That is a reality. We will be seeing SADC election observers in the elections in Namibia. And we hope they will do better. And in future elections, SADC, we are not saying that the SADC should stop observing elections or coming up with some report. Even more so in the case of Zimbabwe. In the case of Zimbabwe, I've said on this platform, and I'll say it again, that SADC, while they failed to produce an ideal GNU in 2008 to 2007, 2013, Nonetheless, that GNU had the potential, if the MDC guys had not sold out, to implement the reforms and end the case of rigged elections in Zimbabwe. Sadc's report on Zimbabwe's elections last year is spot on. They condemned the election process, but they could not go one step further and deny ZANU-PF political legitimacy, because the opposition had participated in those flawed elections and millions of ordinary Zimbabweans had participated in those flawed elections. That wasn't Sadc's fault. It was our fault. So I think it is important to put everything in their proper perspective. The temptation to blame Sadc for all our own failures is overwhelming. We are just as much to blame, particularly Zimbabweans, for the fact that we have got Mnangagwa now as chairperson of Sadc, because we had the opportunity to remove him from office and we did not. We participated in flawed elections last year when we had been warned that doing so will give ZANU-PF legitimacy. So there is a lot to be said there. But I think to return to the issue that we're discussing, Mozambique, and what this Sadc summit was all about, it has failed the people of Mozambique. We expected it to fail because we did not expect Mnangagwa to chair the Sadc summit and condemn himself. Zimbabwe and ZANU-PF are as much in the dock as the Mozambican authorities themselves over the election process in Mozambique. Zimbabwe cannot explain why hundreds of thousands of Zimbabweans ended up voting in those elections. That is the issue. So to come back to the issue and to give the closing remark, it is a pity that Sadc, at a critical point for Mozambique, when they could have helped end Mozambique's problem of rigged elections, the Sadc was being chaired by an officious buffoon masquerading as Sadc's chairman, who rigged Zimbabweans elections and is now exporting some of that rot to other countries. History will not judge Mnangagwa well, particularly as a reference to Mozambique. As I said, the opposition leader in Mozambique has appealed to have the presidential election results at least nullified because so many Zimbabweans voted. I hope that is successful. And that confirms that Zimbabweans did indeed vote in Mozambique's elections. And it's now a historic record. And Sadc, one can only hope, will finally have the courage to discipline Mnangagwa. Thank you very much, Ben. And for those out there who were able to join us tonight, thank you very much again. And I hope you'll be able to join us again tomorrow, 6 o'clock UK time or 8 o'clock Zimbabwean time. Good night.
Good night.